The day I almost lost my family's land was the day I discovered I owned the entire valley. Linda Whitmore called the cops on my illegal cabin at 7:00 a.m. Police sirens cut through the morning mist, smoke from my chimney mixing with diesel exhaust. She had no idea that I didn't just own the land, I owned her mortgage, her husband's business lease, and the road she drove in on 3 months of escalating harassment, noise complaints when I was dead asleep, structure violations on a cabin that existed before she was born, threatening letters demanding $500 a day, fines, random fought the fines on her, but Linda had no clue what she'd started. By the time I was done, she'd be facing courthouse steps, news cameras, and a truth that would wipe that smug smile right off her Botox face. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your location. I want to know if whole Karens are this bad everywhere. Let me take you back to where this all started. My grandfather bought 2,400 acres in Montana's Clearwater Valley back in 1963 for $800. That's what a decent dinner costs now. He got timber rights, mineral rights, water rights, the whole enchilada. Smart old coot knew what he was doing. I inherited this land when I was 28, right after my parents died in a car accident. Spent every summer here as a kid learning carpentry from grandpa, building this a frame cabin with my own hand. S1 200 square ft of pure independence, solar panels, well, water, composting, toilet, completely off-grid and legal in every single way. After burning out in corporate software consulting, I chose the simple life, work remote, breathically in air, no traffic jams or office politics, just me, the mountains, and the sound of wind through pine trees. But gentrification was creeping up the valley like a slow Mixion avalanche. California money buying up plots, building McMansions that looked like they belonged in Beverly Hills, not Big Sky Country. The newest eyesore was Clearwater Estates, 32 luxury homes ranging from $800,000 to $2 million, managed by Whitmore Properties. Enter Linda Whitmore. Picture this: 52 years old, bleach blonde hair sprayed into a helmet, driving a white Escalade that probably cost more than most people's houses. She was Hoa president and the real estate developer, which should have been the first red flag. Her motivation was crystal clear. She wanted my land for phase 2 expansion. With my property, she could triple the value of her existing lots. Her first move was subtle: certified letter claiming my cabin violated neighborhood standards and demanding $500 per day in fines. The letter came on paper so smooth and expensive it felt like silk between my fingers, a stark contrast to the honest, rough, honeyed logs of my cabin walls. When she showed up at my door for the first inspection, I'll never forget the sound of her stiletto heels clicking on my wooden porch boards. Like a woodpecker with anger issues, her perfume was so overwhelming it mixed with the pine sap scent and made my eyes water. She stood there with her pristine manicure, looking at my workless hands like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. This structure is completely inappropriate for our community standards, she announced, waving one manicured finger at my cabin. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice level, this cabin was built in 1995. Your community didn't exist until 2018. Her research must have confirmed what I already knew. My land wasn't technically part of her whole grandpa's deed, predated her development 40 years. So Linda pivoted strategies. If she couldn't use whole rules, she'd find any violation to force a sale, building codes, health department, fire marshal. She was going to throw everything at me until something stuck. The smell of her cigarettes from her idling Escalade mixed with the pine-scented mountain breeze as she stood on my porch plotting my downfall. She had no idea that every threat, every complaint, every legal maneuver was just digging her hole deeper. You can't fight progress, she said with that fake smile. Real estate agents perfect in the mirror. This valley is going to be developed whether you like it or not. I watched her drive away, her white Escalade kicking up dust on the gravel road my grandfather had built with his own hands. The sound of her engine faded into the distance, replaced by the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. What Linda didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that she'd just declared war on the wrong family. Grandpa hadn't just bought land, he'd bought power, and I was about to learn exactly how much power that was. Linda's first real shot across the bow came 2 weeks later, an anonymous tip to the county inspector about an unpermitted structure. I had to laugh. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. Inspector Jake Morrison showed up on a Tuesday morning, apologetic but professional, good old boy with calloused hands and work boots that Had seen actual work. Sorry about this son, got a complaint, have to check it out, you know how it is. No problem, Jake, come in, and we walked through every inch of my cabin. Jake's flashlight beam danced across hand-fitted joints, proper electrical work, structural supports that could probably survive a tornado. His eyebrows kept climbing higher as we went. "Al son, this place is built better than most houses in town. Who did the work?" "My grandfather and I. Took us 3 summers. Jake pulled out the original building permits from 1995. Signed and stamped by his predecessor. Everything legal, everything documented, everything done right. Whoever called this in was either blind or lying," he muttered, making notes on his clipboard. But Linda wasn't done. The smell of her cigarettes lingered in the Mountaineer. The next morning, when I found her business card tucked under my windshield wiper, on the back she had scrawled, "State Environmental Agency complaint filed, illegal sewage disposal. You're finished." Now she was dragging things up to the state level, trying to bury me in bureaucracy. That was my cue to hit back. I called Marcus, an old college friend who'd swapped his environmental science degree for a law degree, and now specialized in defending against exactly this type of harassment. "Bring in a licensed septic inspector," he advised, "and document every detail. No exceptions." So I did. At 6 o'clock sharp, the growl of a pump truck echoed across the valley, probably rattling windows for miles around. It was worth every decibel. The inspection results: my system tested cleaner than what most city treatment plants could boast. The inspector, a grizzled veteran named Bob with 3 decades in the trade, shook his head in admiration. "Son, I've seen $1 million mansions with systems half as good as yours. Whoever reported this doesn't know squat, pardon my French." But then he added something that made my morning coffee taste sweeter. "Funny thing," he said, "we just got another complaint this week about graywater leaking into Clearwater Creek. Traced it back to that new development up the road, Whitmore Properties." The irony was thick enough to split with a chainsaw. While Linda was accusing me of violations, her own subdivision was dumping polluted water into the creek. When I told Marcus, he nearly spit out his coffee. "Most people don't realize this," he explained, "but any septic system installed before 1990 is usually grandfathered in under state law." Linda's about to learn that the hard way. Later that week, Jake Morrison, the county inspector, stopped by. Officially, it was to deliver the inspection report. My system had not only passed but exceeded every requirement. And officially, he lingered on the porch, sipping coffee while the breeze carried his words across the valley. 23 years I've been doing this job," he said. "I've dealt with plenty of developers, but never seen anyone file so many bogus complaints in such a short time. You're the 3rd property owner she's targeted this month." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my cabin. Linda was trying to bulldoze the last wild sanctuary my family had defended for generations. She wasn't simply after my land. She wanted to erase my grandfather's legacy. As the chainsaw roared, and I split deadfall for winter firewood, each strike of the axe felt like a vow to Grandpa. I would not let corporate greed turn his valley into another strip mall. Linda's septic complaint had backfired spectacularly, but her white Escalade soon appeared at county offices all over town. She was plotting the next strike, and I knew it would be bigger. That evening, the scent of sawdust and oil clung to me as mountain air mingled with the eternal perfume of pine. Somewhere in town, Linda was probably on the phone with a pack of lawyers, strategizing her next move. But what she didn't realize was that every attempt only added to the pile of evidence I was building, proof of her relentless harassment. Her next shot came through the fire marshal's office. Apparently my improper wood stove was now a public hazard. The woman had more angles than a geometry class. Fire Marshal Betty Chen arrived with a full crew, clipboards in hand, ready to uncover a meth lab instead of a simple stove. She carried herself with military precision, straight posture, steady gaze, no nonsense. "Show me what you've got," she said. What I had was craftsmanship worth showing off. Gleaming copper pipes, clearances that surpassed code by 6 inches, top-tier materials. Betty's team measured, tested airflow, photographed everything. "Mind if we use these pictures for training?" she asked finally. This installation's textbook better than most pros I've seen. But Linda wasn't finished. Her next stunt filing a complaint with the State Department of Natural Resources, claiming I was running an unlicensed commercial timber operation. It would have been laughable if it weren't so malicious. All I was doing was cutting deadfall for my own firewood, perfectly legal, the forest equivalent of picking sticks off your lawn. DNR agent Tom Rodriguez drove 2 hours from Helena to investigate, clearly irritated. "Ma'am, this is the 5th time you've called us this month," he told her later. During the inspection, he confided Mr. Johnson's within his rights. In fact, clearing deadfall helps the forest. His patience was thinner than a sheet of tissue paper. Mine, on the other hand, was turning into steel. While Linda burned through state resources with her bogus complaints, I decided to start digging into her own business dealings. What I uncovered made my morning coffee taste like sweet victory. Whitmore Properties LLC had some shady financial arrangements. Linda was charging development consultation fees to buyers while conveniently neglecting to mention that she was also the HOA president. It was a textbook conflict of interest and potentially fraud. She was cashing in twice, once when selling the lots, and again by billing for advice on restrictions she herself enforced. Most folks don't realize HOA board members are legally required to disclose any financial stake in community transactions, Marcus explained when I called him with the news. Linda's about to find out exactly why those rules exist. That's when neighbors started rallying behind me. Old Pete, a retired logger who lived downstream, told me she'd pressured him to sell, offering half the value of his land and threatening eminent domain when he refused. His gnarled hands tightened around his coffee mug at Maria's diner as he told the story. Maria Santos, who had fed 3 generations of Valley residents from behind her counter, had her own tales of Linda's tricks. "She's been spreading lies about health code violations at my diner," Maria said, scrubbing the counter with the precision of long habit. 30 years in business, never had a single complaint until she rolled into town. Then there was David Kim, the real surprise, a newcomer who had bought into Linda's development. He thought he was getting a good deal. Turns out Linda had overcharged him by $50,000, pocketing the difference through her so-called consultation fees. Each day, the buzz of my chainsaw echoed through the valley as I cut firewood. Every log split was an act of defiance, a sharp crack that seemed to broadcast my determination to anyone listening. In Old Pete's workshop, the smell of sawdust mingled with oil as we planned our pushback. "You know what burns me up the most," Pete muttered, running his thumb along the scarred axe blade. "She blows in here from California with her fancy car and fake grin, thinking she can bully families who've been here for generations." Maria nodded, her rag gliding across the counter. "My grandfather built this place in 1952, she said. He fed ranchers, loggers, people who worked with their hands. Now she wants to turn our valley into some kind of playground for the rich." But Linda's campaign wasn't slowing down. I often spotted her white Escalade parked outside the county courthouse, plotting her next move. The woman had the persistence of a telemarketer and the scruples to match. What she didn't grasp was that every bogus complaint, every baseless accusation, every veiled threat was leaving behind a paper trail, and I was collecting all of it. Piece by piece, I was building a case that would eventually crush her. Nights in the valley carried the smell of wood smoke from my chimney, blending with the eternal perfume of pine. Somewhere out there, Linda was scheming again, but now I had allies, evidence, and the dawning realization that this fight was no longer about a single cabin. It was about stopping a cycle of abuse that had dragged on for far too long. Over the next month, her tactics reached a fever pitch. Sheriff's deputies started showing up for wellness checks on a near-daily basis, responding to fabricated noise complaints even when my cabin was silent. She even went so far as to call Child Protective Services, claiming kids were endangered by my unsafe living conditions despite the fact I lived alone and the nearest child was 5 miles away. The final straw came one Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Deputy Johnson's cruiser rolled up my gravel drive, red and blue lights flashing through the frost-dark valley like angry fireflies. His boots crunched across the frozen ground as he approached, looking sheepish. "Domestic disturbance report," he said, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry, but I've got to check it out." I stood there barefoot in my pajamas, the cabin dark and silent behind me, no one around for miles. "Deputy, "Do I look like I'm disturbing anyone but myself right now?" I asked. He sighed, jotting notes he likely wouldn't bother to file. "I'm getting 2 or 3 calls a week, all from the same number. Off the record. This is straight up harassment." Linda wasn't slowing down, she was escalating. She filed for an emergency injunction, accusing me of threatening her at an HOA meeting I hadn't even attended. Thursday morning, small claims court. Linda showed up with a high-priced lawyer whose suit probably cost more than my entire truck. I showed up with a plain manila folder and the truth. Judge Patricia Wells, a no-nonsense woman with little patience for theatrics, presided. "Your Honor," Linda's attorney began dramatically, "my client fears for her safety due to Mr. Johnson's increasingly erratic behavior." I stood, pulled out my phone, and projected security camera footage onto the wall, complete with timestamps proving I wasn't anywhere near the alleged meeting. Judge Wells didn't waste time. "Case dismissed. Miss Whitmore, consider this a warning about filing frivolous complaints. This court has better uses for its time." That was my cue to bring in reinforcements. I hired Sarah Chen, a private investigator no relation to the fire marshal, but equally tough, over coffee at Maria's diner. Sarah spread documents across the table like evidence in a homicide case. "She's got a pattern," Sarah explained. 3 other communities. She always goes after landowners sitting on property her developments need. The evidence was damning, to prior lawsuits for HOA conflicts of interest, a suspended California real estate license for undisclosed dual representation, and most shocking $180,000 in unpaid property taxes here in Montana. "Here's the rule of thumb," Sarah advised, tapping her pen on the thick folder. "Document everything with timestamps, patterns mattering." Court. The community began opening up in ways I hadn't seen before. Old Pete revealed that Linda had tried to buy his land for half its value, threatening eminent domain when he said no. "She told me the government would take it anyway if I didn't sell to her," he growled. Maria from the diner shared how Linda had spread lies about health code violations in an attempt to push her into selling. 30 years I've been feeding this valley," Maria said, shaking her head. "And she wants to turn my place into a Starbucks." Even David Kim, a newcomer to the development, discovered he'd been conned, overcharged by $50,000, with Linda pocketing the difference under the label of premium location adjustments. I called it what it was: theft. The crunch of gravel under tires became the soundtrack to her harassment each time another deputy rolled up responding to yet another false report. I documented everything: the time, the photos, even the conversations. My evidence folder was getting thicker than a phone book. One of my security cameras even captured Linda's smug look in the courthouse hallway after her failed injunction, a snapshot of entitlement I knew would haunt her soon enough. I often leaned against the old pine behind my cabin during strategy calls, its rough bark grounding me. That tree had weathered storms for decades, just as my family had weathered threats to this land. Linda, though, was unraveling. Her desperation made her reckless, doubling down on a losing fight. At the post office, I could practically smell the fear beneath her perfume. What she didn't grasp was that every false complaint, every baseless filing, every reckless escalation was weaving the net tighter around her. I was patient, playing the long game. She was to panic to see the trap closing. Evenings carried the familiar scent of pine needles and wood smoke, a peaceful contrast to the chaos she was creating. But I knew this was only the lull before the storm. The turning point came while I was combing through county records, prepping for her latest bogus lawsuit. Sometimes fate has a sense of humor. I was looking for defensive ammunition and stumbled on something closer to a nuclear warhead. Buried in the tangle of county filings, I found that Whitmore Properties had secured a $2.3 million construction loan in 2019. Standard enough for a developer, but the collateral was far from ordinary. It wasn't limited to her land. It included future development rights across the entire valley. That's when I dug deeper. My grandfather had only owned 2,400 acres. Old records revealed he also held the mineral rights under most of the valley, including Linda's entire development. And that wasn't even the biggest revelation. He also held first mortgage positions on 3 key Properties Linda had pledged as collateral, properties she'd sworn she owned outright when applying for financing. How had this been overlooked? Grandpa's estate was sprawling, managed by an old-school lawyer who died in 2018. The new attorney never fully explained the extent of my inheritance. County files were scattered, some dating back to territorial days, stored under inconsistent naming systems. I spent 14 hours digging. I spent hours buried in the county records office, eyes stinging from squinting at microfilm reels and faded documents. But every second of strain was worth it. Grandpa's 1963 purchase wasn't just land, it included all rights, appurtenances, and future development considerations. That old-school legal phrasing from the 1960s gave me something priceless: veto authority over any development impacting the watershed. It was a bombshell. Linda's entire subdivision sat on ground where I controlled both the mineral and water rights. To make matters worse for her, her construction loan was already in default to missed payments during the same months she'd been harassing me. The bank was growing uneasy about whether she could even complete Phase 2, which depended entirely on access to my land. When I finally reached the estate lawyer, the grandson of Grandpa's original attorney, he confirmed my interpretation. "Your grandfather was sharper than most realized," he said over the phone. "He designed this structure specifically to prevent the kind of stunt Ms. Whitmore is attempting." Then came the kicker. Tucked inside the original deed was a handwritten note in Grandpa's steady script on yellowed paper. "For my grandson, never let them turn this valley into another strip mall." Sitting in my truck outside the courthouse, holding that note, I understood. This wasn't just property, it was a trust, a responsibility. Grandpa had seen someone like Linda coming from a mile away and had prepared for the battle 60 years in advance. Most people think land ownership is straightforward. You buy acreage, you own it. But that's rarely the full picture. Mineral rights, water rights, easements, they can all be separate. And in my case, Grandpa had stitched them together in a way that gave me far more power than I ever realized. Linda didn't know it yet, but the cards were in my hand now. Her harassment, lawsuits, and attempts to push me out all relied on the false assumption that she held the upper hand. She didn't. The question was strategy. I could go for the quick kill, expose everything immediately, and watch her empire collapse overnight. Or I could bide my time, let her dig deeper, and build a case so airtight she'd never crawl out. I chose patience, let her escalate, while I quietly collected allies and evidence. When the hammer finally fell, it would be devastating, total and final. Driving home with the windows down, the pine-scented air rushing in, I felt something I hadn't in months: complete certainty. The hunted had become the hunter. And Linda Whitmore had no clue what was bearing down on her. This wasn't going to be a one-man battle anymore. Linda's pattern of abuse had harmed too many people. It was time for a coordinated response. The legal front, my estate attorney, plus Marcus, my old college buddy turned environmental lawyer. The financial sleuth, Maria's nephew Carlos, a forensic accountant with a reputation for tracing dirty money through shell companies. The community backbone, old Pete, Maria, David, Kim, and 3 other neighbors, all victims of Linda's schemes. Our first strategy session took place after ours at Maria's diner. The smell of coffee filled the air, pies cooling on the counter, and legal papers spread across tables that had hosted 3 generations of local decisions. The Warrenwood had soaked up decades of conversations, and tonight it would carry the weight of Linda's reckoning. Marcus sketched it out on napkins like a general outlining a campaign. Phase 1, let Linda escalate while we stack ironclad documentation. Phase 2, leak just enough truth to push her into desperation. Phase 3, public confrontation, full disclosure, airtight evidence, media present. The legal wheels turned immediately. A quiet title action to confirm the full scope of my rights, forcing Linda to stake her claim in court. An environmental impact study request for her Phase 2 project, knowing my veto power loomed. Formal complaint to the state real estate board about her undisclosed conflicts of interest. Carlos's forensic work painted the rest of the picture. Linda had been siphoning HOA dues to cover her personal legal bills, classic embezzlement. She'd double mortgaged her properties to scrape together development funds. And the most damning piece Her construction company was drowning under liens from unpaid subcontractors, over $300,000 in debt. In most Western states, mineral rights can be bought and sold independently from surface rights, I told the group, steam from our coffee rising between us like incense. Always read the deed carefully. Your family might own more than you realize. From that point, our community organizing shifted into overdrive. Weekly coffee gatherings at Maria's Diner became tactical meetings. We pooled resources into a joint legal fund for neighbors under pressure. Most importantly, we made a pact to show up at the next whole meeting together. Linda wouldn't be able to bully a room full of United residents. My cabin turned into headquarters for evidence. Security cameras covered every angle. I installed professional-grade audio recorders for every future encounter with Linda. A licensed surveyor drew up detailed maps, confirming my property lines and rights down to the inch. Every conversation, threat, and bogus complaint was logged with meticulous care. Whole board members have what's called fiduciary duty, Marcus explained one night over coffee, his pen tapping legal notes. They're required to disclose any financial interest in deals involving the community. If they don't, they can be held personally liable. He also walked us through the brilliance of a quiet title action. It forces anyone claiming rights to your land to prove it in court, he said. Once Linda has to respond under oath, her whole scheme gets dragged into the light. During those weeks, I visited Grandpa's grave more often. His simple granite marker had been weathered by decades of storms, but his legacy turned out to be far more intricate than I ever realized. I promised him I'd defend the valley he had protected. This fight was no longer just about property lines, it was about defending community values from corporate greed. Maria's kitchen, filled with the smell of coffee and pie, became our war room. The quiet scrape of pens, the shuffle of papers, and the determined silence of neighbors who had been pushed too far set the tone. Linda's white Escalade began cruising past the diner more often, slowing down as if she could see through the windows. She knew something was brewing, but not what. Her frantic calls to county offices and grandstanding at city council meetings only added to the thickening file of evidence against her. The plan for the big reveal was simple but devastating. Linda's annual HOA meeting was mandatory for residents, a perfect stage. She'd come expecting to roll out her Phase 2 expansion proposal and intimidate her way into approval. Instead, she'd walk into a room full of neighbors, armed with documentation, legal proof, and maybe even media coverage. The venue would be the community center, neutral territory, with room for press and deputies on standby. Sitting on my cabin porch at sunset, looking out over the valley Linda wanted to pave over, I felt something I hadn't since this nightmare began: anticipation. The roles were reversed now. The trap was set, and Linda Whitmore was heading straight for it. The scent of pine filled the air, but beneath it was something sharper, something new, the smell of justice on the horizon. As her finances unraveled, Linda's behavior spun further out of control. Anonymous Craigslist ads popped up, offering my abandoned cabin for $500 a month. Fake social media profiles posted my address as a free campsite for squatters. She even hired a private security outfit to circle my property line like vultures. Then came outright sabotage. My solar panels were mysteriously smashed overnight. Security cameras caught a white Escalade prowling past at 2 a.m. My driveway was blocked with no trespassing signs I had never put up. Most seriously, someone tampered with my well cover in an attempt to poison my water supply. Every single incident was captured: photos, videos, timestamps, written notes. My upgraded system, HD cameras, motion sensors, night vision, audio had turned my cabin into something close to Fort Knox. But the real story was her collapsing empire. Bank notices piled up at her office. The default on her $2.3 million construction loan was only the beginning. Subcontractors lined up with mechanics' liens faster than she could contest them. Her empire was cracking wide open. Then came the bribe attempt. On a Tuesday morning, Linda approached me directly. The sharp perfume she wore couldn't mask the fierce sweat underneath. "Let's be reasonable," she said, her voice pitched a little too high. "I'm willing to make a generous offer, $400,000 cash for your cabin and 50 acres. I declined politely. She upped it to $600,000. Then $800,000. Finally, she hit her ceiling, $1,200,000. Plus I'll cover all your legal fees.
The number nearly made me laugh coffee through my nose. I appreciate the offers, Linda, I said evenly, my audio recorder capturing every syllable. But this land isn't for sale. Not at any price. My counteroffer was designed to push Linda past her breaking point. Tell you what, I said calmly, I'll give my approval for Phase 2 for $5 million cash up front. Her expression shifted in seconds, confusion, then fury, then outright panic.
You're insane. You can't stop development. You're just a squatter with delusions of grandeur, she snapped. I leaned back, amused. I wonder what your investors would say if they knew the truth about your finances, watching her. Pupils widened and fear was almost satisfying. The walls were closing in. Other residents uncovered that Linda had been padding whole budgets to funnel money into her personal legal battles. David Kim unearthed hidden deed restrictions that she'd never disclosed when he purchased his lot. Old Pete's property taxes mysteriously skyrocketed right after he refused her lowball offers. A clear case of retaliation through county contacts. Her PR push spiraled out of control. Facebook rants about dangerous squatters threatening children. Nextdoor posts about insanitary conditions supposedly lowering property values miles away. Anonymous letters to the local paper claiming my cabin posed environmental hazards. But my counter-offensive was airtight. Sarah Chen traced every anonymous complaint back to Linda's own devices using IP logs and metadata. Marcus, my environmental lawyer, commissioned surprise water quality tests. Results proved my land had the cleanest water in the valley. Social media forensics exposed her fake accounts and coordinated smear campaigns. The best part, watching her lose her grip on the story, I quietly alerted her bank about her harassment campaign directly tied to collateral she needed for Phase 2. Formal complaints were filed against her for creek contamination. The State Real Estate Board launched an investigation into her undisclosed dual roles. Her unraveling was visible. Designer clothes that looked slept in, makeup applied with a trembling hand, her once pristine Escalade now dented from reckless driving. Even her hired security patrols backfired. Tree branches cracked under their careless watch, damaging my property, with every incident neatly documented in my growing evidence file. Always check the financial angle when someone's harassing you over land, I told Maria during a late-night session. Desperation makes people careless, and carelessness leaves trails. From my porch, chimney smoke curling into the evening air, I sent a deliberate signal. I wasn't going anywhere. Linda might still be dialing lawyers, hunting for loopholes that didn't exist, but she was only tightening the noose with every move. The trap was almost ready. Her last gambit was as brazen as it was sloppy. Forged documents claiming my grandfather had sold development rights in 1987, decades after his original purchase. A fabricated environmental study alleging my septic system polluted groundwater across 3 counties, and the PSD resistance, a bogus restraining order claiming I'd threatened her during a confrontation that never happened. The forgeries fell apart instantly. My estate attorney laughed out loud at the supposed signature. Not even close. Whoever faked this never saw your grandfather's handwriting. The notary stamp. From a notary who died in 1985, 2 years before the alleged signing date. Paper analysis confirmed. The documents had been manufactured recently with artificially aged stock. Her impact study was just as absurd. It used data pulled from the Bitterroot Valley, 200 miles away, with completely different geology. Meanwhile, certified lab tests proved my water supply was cleaner than the municipal systems in 3 nearby towns. At the restraining order hearing, Linda even brought in a so-called eyewitness who claimed he'd seen me threaten her. The man had never met me in his life and couldn't have picked me out of a 2-person lineup. Simply rolled the security footage. 6 straight weeks with zero contact between me and Linda. Judge Wells was unimpressed. Case dismissed, she ruled, ordering Linda to pay my legal fees. Her voice cut sharp. Miss Whitmore, this is your final warning about frivolous litigation. Next time, sanctions will follow. The real win wasn't just the court ruling, it was the total implosion of Linda's smear campaign. The local paper dug into her claims and uncovered her long trail of false accusations. Environmental groups rallied behind me, framing her attacks as a direct threat to rural land rights. Social media roasted her. Screenshots of her fake impact study went viral, shredded by scientists. Her sock puppet accounts were banned, and even allies within her development started backing away. Her financial collapse snowballed. The bank, furious over forged collateral, called her to $0.3 million loan immediately due. The IRS slapped liens on her properties for $180,000 in unpaid taxes. Her real estate license was formally suspended, pending criminal charges. I was ready for the final act. Every step had been methodical. Documentary filmmaker Ashley Kim David's sister flew in from Seattle to capture the showdown on film. Marcus prepared a presentation that laid out Linda's environmental violations like a criminal indictment. The community, we were united like never before. Everyone planned to attend the whole meeting in force. Old Pete even brought his Pete's Vietnam veteran buddies sat with him. Men who had spent their lives staring down corporate land grabs and government overreach. They'd seen this exact strategy before. Developers always use the same tricks, Pete said, his calloused hands steady as stone. They intimidate, manipulate the law, and try to steal what isn't theirs. It's about time somebody stood up. Maria took charge of logistics, arranging food for the community meeting. Nothing draws folks together like a hot meal, she said as the smell of coffee and fresh pie filled her kitchen. Linda's about to learn what a real community looks like. Meanwhile, David Kim coordinated with other residents in Linda's development, helping launch a class action lawsuit over the inflated prices they'd been charged. It wasn't just about recouping their losses, it was about stripping away what little credibility Linda still had. Linda's last-ditch efforts grew frantic. She tried canceling the HOA annual meeting illegal under state law. She attempted to bar me from voting. Even though my mineral rights gave me legal standing, she even hired a group of fake supporters to pad the audience, but they stuck out like sore thumbs and only drew more suspicion. Our preparation was surgical. The surveyor produced detailed, color-coded maps verifying my land rights. Carlos, the forensic accountant, built a financial presentation damning enough to make a prosecutor cheer. Even the attorney general's office signaled they were watching closely. The stage was set, the community center reserved. Local reporters alerted to a major story. Sheriff's deputies posted for order. Linda had no clue her empire was about to collapse in public view. I replayed her recorded phone calls that evening. The tremor in her voice betrayed everything. At our last run-in at the post office, her designer perfume couldn't mask the fear beneath it. Carrying Grandpa's deed in my briefcase felt like holding justice itself. Forgery is the last refuge of someone who knows they've already lost, I told the documentary crew during a pre-meeting interview. And document fraud isn't just dirty, it's a felony. That night, I stood on my porch, the sun sinking behind the mountains Linda wanted to pave over. Tomorrow, 3 months of her lies and intimidation would finally face the truth. The Clearwater Community Center overflowed. 150 residents crammed into a room built for 100. The air buzzed with tension and expectation. News cameras were set up in the back. Ashley Kim adjusted her documentary gear. Deputies flanked the exits. Linda's camp clustered at the front, her high-priced attorney in a $3,000 suit, a few fake supporters glued to their phones, and a hired guard looking uneasy as the crowd swelled with furious locals. The rest of the space belonged to the community. Pete and his veteran friends, faces like weathered stone. Maria with her extended family, 3 generations strong. David Kim and the other overcharged buyers, paperwork in hand. The energy was electric. Like a storm ready to break. Linda called the meeting to order, her voice higher than usual, her hands trembling as she shuffled papers. Tonight, we'll vote on Phase 2 expansion, which will bring prosperity and progress to Clearwater Estates, she announced. Her PowerPoint glowed with glossy renderings of McMansions carved into hillsides, pie-in-the-sky growth projections, and front and center my grandfather's land labeled future development parcel. This illegal cabin, she said, jabbing a finger at a photo of my home, is all that stands between us and our community's full potential. The board recommends immediate eminent domain. I stood. Point of order, I'd like to address the assembly. Her face flushed. You have no standing here. This is a private hall meeting. I lifted the mic I'd brought. Actually, I do. Would you like to see my mineral rights documentation? The room erupted. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but Deputy Johnson stepped in. Ma'am, this is America. Let him speak. Let him speak. Pete's veterans started the chant. The whole room picked it up until Linda, red-faced, had no choice but to step aside. I connected my laptop to the projector. On the wall appeared Grandpa's original 1963 deed. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, Linda has been trying to take land she never had any claim to. The shock was palpable. I laid it out: mineral rights, water rights, development restrictions, and the legal framework giving me veto power over any project threatening the watershed. She's spent 3 months harassing me for land I own and that she needs permission to build. Brown, Linda lost it. Those documents are fake. He's a squatter. An eco-terrorist who's been threatening me. Really, I clicked the next slide. Let's talk about threats. The avalanche began. Marcus presented certified deeds. Carlos revealed her embezzlement of HOA dues, double mortgage properties, and unpaid taxes. The environmental lawyer showed photos of creek contamination next to lab results proving my water tested cleaner than municipal supplies. Then the community delivered blow after blow. Pete stood tall. She tried to cheat me out of my family's land to half price, with threats of eminent domain. Maria followed. She used HOA funds for her own lawyers. 30 years I've run this diner, and she wanted to bulldoze it for a parking lot. David Kim dropped the hammer. She overcharged me 50 grand and called it a premium location fee. That's not business, that's theft. And then came the moment that silenced the room. A man in a dark suit rose from the back. Miss Whitmore, he said, Robert Chen, First National Bank. Your construction loan is in default. We're calling it due immediately. Your collateral is inadequate. And this gentleman, he nodded toward me, owns the mineral rights beneath your entire development. Your phase 2 expansion is financially impossible. Linda broke. She shrieked about conspiracies and unfairness, threatened lawsuits, then blurted out in rage, those documents were perfect, you can't prove they're fake. Deputy Johnson raised his notepad. Did you just admit to forging records on camera? The vote was swift and crushing. Phase 2 expansion rejected, 87% to 13%. A unanimous vote of no confidence stripped Linda of her HOA presidency. The room passed a resolution in support of my conservation efforts by acclamation. As deputies escorted her out, still ranting threats, I turned to the stunned crowd. Linda, you just threatened me in front of 150 witnesses and 3 cameras. I think we're finished here. The collective gasp said it all. Linda's face flickered between fury and fear, the sour tang of sweat hanging in the overheated room. Justice had finally arrived, not just in theory, but in sound, sight, and smell. A week later, the moment became official. Linda Whitmore was arrested for embezzlement and document fraud. Seeing her in handcuffs on the evening news felt like the closing chapter of a battle that had consumed my life for 3 relentless months. Her properties slid into foreclosure. Her real estate license was permanently stripped. The woman who had tried to steal my family's legacy now faced 5 to 10 years in federal prison. The legal resolutions came quickly. My quiet title action confirmed my sweeping rights across the valley. Her environmental violations triggered a $500,000 fine against her company. Money that would be used to restore the watershed for decades to come. The HOA dissolved her company's contract and replaced its leadership. Maria was elected president. A change everyone celebrated. But the biggest transformation wasn't legal or financial, it was personal. I'd once planned to split my time here, half in the corporate world, half in the mountains. That plan died with Linda's defeat. This place was no longer just an inheritance, it was my mission. I launched a conservation easement protecting 1,800 acres of fragile watershed. 3 neighboring families joined immediately, creating a protective buffer that would shield the valley from future developers like Linda. Our project soon became a model for conservation efforts across Montana. The ripple effects were extraordinary. We created the Clearwater Valley Scholarship Fund using forfeited deposits from Linda's accounts, sending 3 kids to college each year. The Conservation Trust safeguarded the watershed while still allowing sustainable forestry and carefully managed development. Our new annual Harvest Festival brought the whole community together last year. More than 500 visitors came, supporting local farmers, artists, and shops. The change for individuals was profound. Old Pete saw his land values rise by 40% thanks to conservation protections, finally securing the retirement he'd earned after a lifetime of labor. Maria's diner transformed into the unofficial heart of the valley, busier than ever as the community's gathering place. David Kim, who recovered his overpayments through the class action, became both a close friend and the volunteer coordinator for our conservation projects. Other rural communities began contacting me, inspired by our fight. Soon we had a statewide network of landowner advocates standing up to similar schemes. Ashley's documentary won a regional film festival award and raised national awareness about corporate land grabs. Even the state legislature took notice, passing the Linda Law, designed to prevent HOA board conflicts of interest. Real reform born out of our struggle. Justice wasn't just local. Linda seized assets, reimbursed some victims of her fraud. I bought her foreclosed properties at auction, folding them into the conservation easements so they'd never again threaten the valley. The bank quietly settled, admitting its sloppy oversight and tightening its review procedures. Our fight became a blueprint for others. Local papers published exposes on similar abuses across rural America. Environmental groups used our case to educate landowners on their rights. The real estate industry was forced to adopt stronger oversight on conflicts of interest. But the true victory was in the sounds and sights of the valley itself. Not courtroom threats, but children laughing at the Harvest Festival. Not the grind of bulldozers, but the crackle of bonfire smoke mixing with the timeless scent of pine. Not the drone of legal arguments, but the chorus of birds and the rush of mountain wind. Standing on my porch at sunset, gazing at a valley free of McMansions, I finally understood what Grandpa meant when he spoke of stewardship. This was never just about property, it was about protecting something irreplaceable for people not yet born. I tell anyone who asks, always dig into who's behind the development pressure. Financial desperation drives most harassment. Mineral rights often matter more than surface rights. And remember, HOA board members are legally obligated to disclose conflicts of interest, no matter how hard they pretend otherwise. Linda's downfall also revealed she wasn't working alone. Her arrest uncovered a network of corrupt developers stretching across 3 states.